100%. And when I started, that was just a philosophy to say,
Okay.
we could just do it from behind our computers. We could scale using, effective paid marketing. We could get that organic up. We could grow via the traditional channels. You'd scale a tech-ish company. But the theory was, I think, if to build a solid brand that had a personality behind it, we have to be out there and we have to be talking to businesses. So absolutely everyone in my team for at least the first few years would go out and talk to small businesses, understand what their concerns were, help them plug in their devices.
Sure.
Countless stories of our team running down to help cafes when their Wi-Fi dropped out. Not our job at all, but that could help them and help build trust in our brand. So I did a lot of that. I purposely didn't have a sales team for at least sort of 2.5 years or 2 years since the initial launch. And the strategy was there. I didn't want to say, okay, it's that team over there who's responsible, good or bad, for scaling.
Okay.
It had to be everyone owned it. So whether you were the compliance lead, the risk lead, the office manager, the comms marketing, doesn't matter. You should be talking to businesses and you should be understanding what they need and what they want. I think that legitimacy comes through in the relationship. So that's obviously not scalable. You can't keep doing that.
Yeah, you need a lot of people.
You need a lot of people to keep doing it to many, many businesses. But I think if you do it right at the start, it just sets that the grassroots of what your brand stands for. And I still hear it today with people that I meet with and they say, I still remember one of your team members helped us here, or, we were doing a market and you needed some help with setting up and there was a person there to help me. And so those sort of anecdotes, I think, propagate other businesses and helps build your brand. So I think it was incredibly important.
And one of the things you do really well is you're incredibly transparent as well. I think anyone who's dealt with you will know that you're extremely straight to the point, but I'm sure that also shapes people the wrong way sometimes. So it takes a bit of adapting for a lot of people to get used to, but has that always been your approach to things?
Yeah, listen, I am absolutely transparent. I would say it's a strength, but it's also something that can be quite challenging. So listen, I think you and I had some challenging in the beginning, right? I'm not sure you were ready for the transparency that I brought on. Was I, Jason?
No, I was not. There you go. Transparency in action right here on the podcast.
Yeah. So I think what transparency does, and I don't pretend that I'm perfect at it at all, but I think what transparency does is it gets the real issue on the table really, really quickly, and then it allows people to solve for it. It's not always comfortable, but it's in that discomfort that a breakthrough can be made. And that's my philosophy. I thought about this long and hard. As I went through BP, my transparency is not a natural fit to a company like BP. I mean, BP started off as a British, part of the British government, right? And for folks that have spent time in Britain, it is a reserved society. I'm not a reserved individual. So I had to think through, how do I want to drive the changes that I want to, and what am I willing to fail at, and what am I willing to succeed at? And at the end of the day, I thought it's really important for me to be authentic to who I am as a person. And one of those things is putting it all on the table for discussion. It means I need to listen as well. And, I think I do okay at that. I could probably do better. But getting issues on the table so that we can all try to find a solution for it allows companies to move at pace and tackle the real issues. I mean, one of the things I use as an analogy as well is, if you're an alcoholic and you don't admit you're an alcoholic, you have no chance of fixing that disease, okay? And it's when you admit you have a problem that you can actually go after and solve the problem. Too many companies don't admit they have a problem.
No, it wasn't obvious from the start that we'd end up building a business together, but I think it was pretty obvious from the start that we were a great team. So I think we're very lucky that we almost had that sort of practice run, working in an agency together across those 5 years, really understanding what each other's skill sets were. We became friends outside of work. We even shared a brief stint as housemates. So we knew each other really well. But of course, starting a business is a totally different beast. So you're obviously going to be faced with unexpected challenges. And like all co-founders, we've had to navigate some really difficult things. But ultimately, navigating those things together has only made our relationship stronger and the business better because of it.
What were some of those difficult things, if you don't mind sharing?
No, sure.
It's always interesting to dig into.
We always talk
dynamic.
openly about some of the most difficult challenges. You know, one of the first things was at the time when we launched the business, because of my visa being from the UK, I couldn't jump into the business full time, whereas Verity could jump into the business full time. So immediately we had to navigate this situation where Vaz was going to be spending, you know, at least 5 days a week in the business. I was going to be spending 2 to 3 days a week in the business, whilst maintaining an additional part-time job. But as 50-50 shareholders in a business, instantly that creates this kind of inequality in terms of hours and effort that you're putting in. And the way that we navigated that is, I think, pretty unique, but it worked for us. So we essentially salary shared. So everything I was earning from my part-time job, I essentially shared with Vaz.
Wow.
So that it felt that even though I wasn't able to put as much time into the business as her in those early days, we were kind of leveling the playing field in a slightly different way.
That's incredible. That's a lot of trust to have in your co-founder on both sides of the coin.
I think it just worked. And I think we're lucky that we already had that trusting relationship there. So it didn't actually feel like a big deal.
I think what has held me in good steads with sales, and whether it's pitching to Coles or Woolworths, is just being empathetic and constantly putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Right.
And so rather than, and like what I said with, you know, the startup environment is constantly pitching yourself and going, this is how good I am. These are my numbers. I think what has worked in my favor when dealing with Coles, and a lesson that I've refined over time, is why would that buyer want to talk to me?
Right.
And how am I going to make that buyer look good? If that buyer is driven by KPIs and sales targets and margins, I need to consider that. Sure. And that needs to be part of the pitch. And if they feel like I know what, you know, they're driven by, it's kind of like it's like human psychology. It's like knowing what people are driven by and then delivering the story and the solution to that. And so essentially that's how I did it. Of, you know, this category lacks innovation.
Sure.
I'm here to shake things up. I have this social media following, and I'm going to bring new incremental shoppers into your store.
Right.
That will drive not only value to the spice category, but then they're going to go to the fresh food section and buy more vegetables. And, you know, I also had, I guess, the strength of having a direct to consumer relationship and having my online store is I had statistics of as well what other products people would buy through the shopping process.
Sure.
So using that worked in my favor, and I was just lucky enough that a buyer saw an opportunity for the category, and chose me, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity.
That's great. And you're not just, how would you describe that sales process working with such large companies when you're a tiny startup here in Australia, nonetheless,
Yes.
trying to sign a client in the US?
Yeah. I mean, I think Australian startups or Australian company at all, if you have a global product, but if you can't get global within 6 to 12 months, you don't have a product. You don't have I'm really sorry, but if you have a very Australian specific product, like you have a certain credit license or something that you only want to or can operate in Australia, that's totally different. If you have a SaaS platform that can be used by anyone around the world, like if Intercom or Pipedrive, you know, had never been able to, I mean, they're American-based, terrible example, but if they could only ever take their own geographical market, probably something's wrong. And so I think knowing that if you want a global presence, you have to think globally from the get-go. And so we were doing demos and meetings at 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
You know, and then they would ask you where you were, and, you know, you'd say, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And then people would go, oh God, I'm so sorry. No, it's fine. Because you have to make it easy to do business with you from Australia. And so whether or not that's spending, you know, 5, 6, 7 months at a time there, or whether it's quick trips back and forth like I was doing, you need to get a presence there. You need to be honest with yourself about whether the problems that you're solving for Australian businesses are the same problems that you can solve in the US. And if they are, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be over there doing it for them.
So that, I mean, that's one element. The other element is the discipline, right? Is that every day, with jiu-jitsu, you have a disciplined set of principles. It's an incredibly humbling experience where you're taught and reminded every day that there are people out there that are better than you, stronger than you, and you are just, you know nothing, right? And so every day is about learning something new to be able to add to my essential game. And so when I look at that from a business and life perspective, it's really about coming into every day as a new training session and going, all right, what can I learn today? What can I add to my repertoire of my game? And how do I get through today and try to beat some of my opponents?